He's doing as president. That's down from 41% in July. Joining me now is CNN political commentator and political anchor for Spectrum News, Errol Lewis. Errol, good morning to you. All right, so these, of course, are in the context of the election. We are 14 months out. So we always say there's a lot that can change, right? The economy can change. The war in Ukraine can change. Things that are happening in Congress can change. One thing that's not going to change is Biden is still going to be in his 80s. At the election, and he's going to be a year deeper into it right now. So when we look at the polling, and Democrats who are concerned, 49% of them, say that they're concerned about his age, what can they do about that at all? Anything?
Good morning, Victor. Yes, there's plenty that the team can do, and we're going to watch them do it because they're going to have to. First of all, let's be clear. There are presidents who, in their first term at a comparable stage, meaning a year out from election, a little more than a year, went on to win smashing re-elections, easy re-elections. That includes Nixon, that includes Reagan, that includes Bill Clinton, that includes Barack Obama. So Biden's in trouble, but he's not in deep trouble, at least not yet. But also, to answer your question, to the extent that this is somebody who has to answer questions about whether or not he is up to the job, whether he has the vitality, the stamina, not just to govern, but even to run the campaign properly, these are valid concerns. We've never had anybody this old, and he knows that he has to answer it. One interesting number, though, you have to keep in mind, Victor, is that of those who think that Joe Biden is too old to run for re-election, 83% cannot name an alternative. So, you can't beat somebody with nobody. And so to the extent that, you think Cornel West or Marianne Williamson or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. poses a real threat, the polls don't really back that up. People are concerned, as they should be. It'll be up to the Biden team to sort of deal with those fears and make it clear that he does have the strength and the stamina and the sharpness to serve another term.
Yeah, and the president has often said that don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. And you got the 67% of Dems or independent, Democratic-leaning independents who say they want the party to nominate someone else. As you point out, most of them don't know who that person should be, and most of them say if he's the nominee, they will vote for him anyway. Some of the passion maybe comes from the alternative on the other side of the ballot.
Well, that's right. Look, to the extent that Joe Biden, when Joe Biden makes this race about Donald Trump, he does better in the polls. And to the extent that he already beat Trump and is looking for a rematch, he would love to have that be the entire conversation. It's not going to quite necessarily come down to that, though, because there are these other questions that have nothing to do with Donald Trump. One of them is, in fact, the age, the sharpness, and the stamina of the incumbent, as well as the policies of the incumbent. He's going to have to run on his record. He's comfortable doing that, but not everybody's happy with inflation. Not everybody's happy with the handling of the economy. And so, this is going to be an uphill fight. They're going to need some creativity. They're going to need to calm down an angry public because people are not happy about inflation in particular. And he's got his work cut out for him.
So let's look at the Republicans here. There's also the CNN polling that shows that President Biden is neck and neck in a general election against Pence, Scott, Ramaswamy, DeSantis, Christie. We've seen the Trump number. Only Nikki Haley is outside of the margin of error, 6 points ahead of the president in a potential general election. She's still at 7%, though. Does that change anything long term? Electability really has not been what has driven Republican base voters thus far in the process.
That's exactly right. Look, what I see that as reflecting, Victor, among other things, is that here are the growing demographics within the voting population. It's educated voters, it's women, it's younger voters, it's communities of color. And you have all of that in the form of Nikki Haley. You also have all of that, by the way, in the form of Kamala Harris, another young college-educated woman of Indian descent who Joe Biden had the foresight to make his running mate. But it does show where the Republican Party could go if electability is what you want. It just doesn't seem likely that she's going to be able to overcome the many hurdles to Donald Trump's kind of a steamroller to the nomination.
Errol Lewis, always good to have you. Thank you, sir.